Across the entire world, we are seeing central banks and governments creating more currency than ever before. Are they creating wealth, or does this come at a cost? In this episode, we are going to explore the concept of wealth. You will know how to measure and grow it, how it is being silently stolen from you, and how you can protect your wealth. Wealth. Why does it matter? Why do we spend our whole lives seeking to grow it? How wealthy are you? Do you know? What is wealth exactly, and how do you measure it? Let's take a look at two families. The Joneses make $1 million per year, and their standard of living requires $1 million per year. They live in the biggest house they can afford, they drive the fanciest cars, they eat the nicest foods, but yet they have no savings. On the other hand, the Frugals live well below their means. The Frugals make $100,000 per year, but live on $50,000 a year, and they save the other $50,000. After 10 years, the Frugals saved $500,000. That's only half of the Joneses' annual income. Which family is wealthier? Most people measure wealth by how much money they make, or by their net worth. However, this is not an accurate way to measure wealth. Wealth is better measured in time. If the Joneses lost their entire income, how long could they maintain their current standard of living? In this scenario, the Joneses have no wealth at all because they did not save and plan for an unexpected loss. A total loss of income would be incredibly devastating. On the other hand, the Frugals have 10 years of wealth, meaning if they lost all of their income, they could maintain their current standard of living for 10 whole years. A loss of income wouldn't be devastating at all for the Frugals, and they could even use that opportunity to take a long vacation, and they would have plenty of time to replace their former income. Wealth is stored time. It doesn't matter how much money you make. This is why it's so important to save and live below your means. We have all heard this advice before. So how much time do you have saved? If your household lost all of its income, how long could you maintain your current standard of living? I challenge you to calculate it. If you don't have enough wealth, there's only two ways to get more. Lower your standard of living or increase your income, and make sure to save the difference. Okay, so now that you know what wealth is and how to get more, the final question is, where do you store your wealth? Money was historically useful for storing your wealth. Good money is scarce, durable, portable, divisible, and fungible. We'll talk more about the qualities of money in our next video, but for the purpose of storing wealth, money must be scarce. Once you trade your time and labor for money, you can spend that money on goods today or save that money for the future. You can think of money like a battery of wealth, and thus your time. Gold and silver fit this role very well throughout human history because they all had the qualities of good money. They have always been a great means of storing wealth as they are scarce resources and costly to mine. However, precious metals became inefficient to use as money as economies grew. Paper currency became the standard because it was more efficient in trade, and yet it still retained all of the qualities of good money. It even had scarcity when we were on a gold and silver standard. Your paper currency was redeemable for actual gold and silver. This was important at the time because no one would have switched from using gold to fiat limitless paper overnight. However, as decades went by, we slowly left the precious metal standard, and in 1971, the world officially went to a fiat currency standard. Because of that, currencies around the world have been increasingly losing their scarcity. So what happens when money is no longer scarce? Similar to how a battery depletes over time, the more currency gets created, the more your wealth depletes. For example, let's say 20 years ago you worked 8 hours and earned $100 and saved it as cash. If you spent it today, you would need an extra $50 just to retain the purchasing power you had back then. So essentially, it would have taken an additional 4 hours just to retain $100 worth of purchasing power in 20 years. It makes a third of the hours you worked disappear, like you never did the work. But you did do the work, and you can prove it. It doesn't matter. Those extra 4 hours were stolen from you, quietly and sneakily, without your permission, and without being able to vote on it. Who is responsible then? Governments and central banks are responsible, because unlike everyone else, they don't have to produce value in order to earn wealth. They can print currency for pennies on the dollar, and they can also digitally produce it at no cost, with just a few clicks on a keyboard. Increasing the supply of currency does not increase wealth. Wealth must be earned by providing value in order to be created. The wealth that exists in these printed dollars is merely transferred from our batteries into theirs. It's as if every currency has an invisible cable attached to it, draining it slowly over time. Inflation is a hidden tax on wealth. Still don't believe me? By a continuing process of inflation, governments can confiscate, secretly and unobserved, an important part of the wealth of their citizens. By this method, they not only confiscate, but they confiscate arbitrarily. And while the process impoverishes many, it actually enriches some. As the inflation proceeds and the real value of the currency fluctuates wildly from month to month, all permanent relations between debtors and creditors, which form the ultimate foundation of capitalism, become so utterly disordered as to be almost meaningless. And the process of wealth getting degenerates into gamble and lottery. Lenin was certainly right. There is no subtler, no surer means of overturning the existing basis of society than to debauch the currency. The process engages all of the hidden forces of economic law on the side of destruction, and does it in a manner which not one man in a million is able to diagnose. The Economic Consequences of Peace by John Maynard Keynes. It is quite unfortunate because today you are encouraged to either spend the majority of your wealth or to gamble it into risky markets in order to attempt to preserve or grow it. Savings accounts, CDs, and bonds no longer give enough interest to match or beat inflation. In today's world, savers are losers. People wonder why they feel like they're working all their lives and getting nowhere. This is the main driver of wealth inequality, and it's getting worse as the time goes on. The people closest to the newly issued currency receive the benefits, while everyone else suffers. The decrease in purchasing power incurred by holders of money due to inflation imparts gains to the issuers of money, Federal Reserve. As you can see, this is a major problem. But what can we do to safely store our wealth? Up until recently, the best ways to protect your wealth was to buy bonds, gamble in the stock markets, buy real estate or land, or buy gold or silver. All of these methods have had problems, and all of them require trust in third parties. Now there is a solution that is better than fiat currency, scarcer than gold, and transferable to anyone around the world in minutes, trustlessly and without any middlemen. I'm talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin gives you exclusive control over your wealth. It is the perfect wealth battery. There are no invisible cables allowing for the drainage of your wealth. No small group of people in a city far away can inflate the supply. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin in existence. Therefore, it is the scarcest money in the world. It is also the most powerful network ever created. In 2013, Bitcoin had more computing power securing the network than the top 500 supercomputers in the world combined. Just to put that into perspective today, Bitcoin is still very new, so early adopters are getting rewarded as increasing amounts of wealth enter Bitcoin. If 5 years ago you saved $100 in cash, you would now have $90 worth of purchasing power. If at that time you saved $100 in gold, it would be worth about $165 today. If 5 years ago you invested $100 in Bitcoin, you would now have $4,500 worth of purchasing power. If you think that's amazing, then please smash that like button. You might be asking, but isn't it just a risky investment like Wall Street? I mean, you could have invested $100 nearly 3 years ago at its all-time high of around $20,000, and you'd also have lost about half of your wealth. Take into account the entire history of Bitcoin. Even if you buy at all-time highs, given a few years, your investment historically always becomes profitable. Like I said in my last price video, check it out. Even if you bought at the all-time high back here in 2013, and that was right under $1,200, even then, if you had waited 4 years, I mean, you would just have massive gains after that, because we have never seen a $1,200 Bitcoin ever since this last halving, and the lowest it's actually gone was right above 3,000. So I mean, that's triple your money right there. That's pretty huge. I mean, a lot of stock market gains aren't even that high. So Bitcoin, it definitely goes in cycles. It's a long-term investment. Bitcoin is new and is going through price discovery. So yes, it is volatile, and it is possible to lose wealth in the short term. However, that is very unlikely. Bitcoin has been profitable during 96% of its entire history. Bitcoin is not only the best place to store your wealth at this time in history, it's also the best place to grow your wealth. Finally, it happens to be the best place to transport your wealth. Imagine trying to move large amounts of gold overseas. It will take a lot of time, security, and energy costs. With Bitcoin, I can move millions or even billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin anywhere in the world within minutes for just a few dollars in fees, and with much more security. Nobody can stop that transfer, not even the government. For the first time in history, Bitcoin also makes it possible to take with you your entire sum of wealth with nothing but your brain. Yes, even in the most dystopic scenarios possible, as long as you can memorize your seed phrase or your private keys, you could escape with your entire sum of wealth in Bitcoin and carry nothing else with you. Countless people throughout history have had all of their wealth seized or confiscated while fleeing tyranny. When they arrived at where they wanted to go, they either arrived with debt or with no wealth at all. I couldn't even imagine how terrible that would be, to work and save your whole life only to have to start over with nothing, thanks to events completely outside of your control. Bitcoin fixes this, because no one can confiscate your thoughts and memories without you making that choice. So what's the takeaway from this? I believe that Bitcoin is the best way to store your wealth for the long term. Bitcoin is also the quickest, most efficient, and most secure method to transport your wealth. In the next video, we're going to talk about the history and properties of money, and I will demonstrate why Bitcoin is a better money.